So today I'm going to spend some time thinking about creativity. So what is creativity? It's our innate need to express, to make marks, to interpret the world, to understand the world, to communicate with ourselves and other people, to get a sense of what it is to be a person and to be in a group. And I think you can say this is perhaps a part of us which is like one of the drives which Freud highlighted. You know, we have an innate drive to create, and this is very powerful. So if we curb this, or we don't respond to this strong desire we have to create, our lives can become quite inhibited, they can become quite painful. So if we cast our minds back to when we're children and what's that like to play, how that feels to be creative, to have fun with other children, to make marks and not think about what it's going to look like at the end. Experiment, but not thinking, okay, I'm going to experiment, but just simply doing it because that's what comes naturally. And that play is super important because that is what helps us to learn to symbolize, to understand our surroundings, and metaphors come from our capacity to play and create things, to allow things to emerge and form as part of a process. But it's never about kind of thinking about the outcome, certainly at that early stage of creativity. Now, some countries understand this more than others, I guess, in terms of their curriculums, in terms of education, because some countries tend to phase out this play element of the curriculum earlier than others, because some countries, I guess, understand in order to really gain a sense of self and to understand what it is to be a person in 2019, play and creativity are incredibly important. And in terms of really grounding that sense of self within us, and in terms of our identities, play is very important. Other countries tend to put more focus on academic ability and introduce that earlier, and I can understand that because we need to have that academic ability in life. We need those skills, right? It's not just about being an infant and mucking around and playing for our whole lives. It sounds like fun, but it's not reality. But how soon should we introduce that reality into our lives? I mean, that's another question, maybe for another conversation. But we can really quite quickly become too preoccupied by targets and function and analysis. So much so that then we can really start to jeopardize, to impede upon our capacity to create in the world. When society is like this, and combined with the vulnerability of creativity, because when we do create, we do make ourselves vulnerable, this can really crush the creativity of the individual and of society at large if we're not careful. Because when we're creating things, we can quickly accumulate quite a critical superego, well, what Freud called the superego, And the superego can really easily pull apart what we're doing. And this is something we internalize. And if we have enough what are called micro traumas of criticism in our life when we're creating, then we can actually quite quickly develop this quite savage inner critic or superego, this kind of out of control conscience which really kind of punishes us, and so all the time we're kind of painting or making a piece of music or writing a poem, whatever, or it might be beyond the world of the arts. It might be, organising a party for somebody or an outing somewhere, and we lose this sense of spontaneity because we're just thinking about, is this going to be good enough? And we've got this kind of projected idea of what this other person that we've somehow internalized might judge, that might think about what we've done. And that's crippling. So when you combine this internalized superego with the already analytical culture, then this can be really, really damaging for creativity. And we can start to look for validation in the wrong kinds of areas. Because all the time we're thinking about outcomes and what this is going to look like at the end. We're thinking about who we can impress as well. And we're looking to get our narcissistic wounding from these micro-traumas from the wrong kind of places. So we're looking for it from maybe social media, for example, getting likes there. And how many likes have I got? Maybe asking even people who don't have a clue about the arts, what they think of our work, And this can be absolutely, this can be a really, really hard place to be and a painful place to be. And people can then try to replace or heal their trauma through addictions, for example, to try to blot out this very painful aspect of the superego. So how can we is there an antidote to this? Are we, once we're aware that we have this superego, this savage inner critic, is there anything that we can do about this? How can we move on? I would suggest perhaps experimenting, taking lessons from childhood. I think thinking about how we can play again, how we can improvise, how we can introduce spontaneity into our lives again. So some examples maybe for those of you who are musicians, perhaps to change instrument. If you're a pianist, perhaps you could play the drums, or the mandolin, or the glockenspiel. If you're an artist who paints figuratively or graphically, perhaps you could try doing so with your non-able hand, or experimenting with a different medium or mode of expression, such as abstract art, for example. If you feel rather stuck and you have writer's block, then maybe you might want to consider an improvisation group. There's plenty of those around. I understand for people who don't live in cities that might be more tricky, but there are plenty of resources also online now about improvisation and how that can be introduced into one's life. Thinking about chance, I think the pioneers of thinking about chance and creativity, such as John Cage and Brian Eno, could be great people to look to here. Brian Eno, for example, had this bunch of cards which were called the oblique strategies, which when you had a creative block, you could actually pick a card and it would free you up. I remember one of those cards that always stays with me is the one that says, if you've played a wrong note, then play it again. So it's really validating that fear of making a mistake, because that fear of making a mistake, again, that's the superego, which has got its hold over us. And again, Freud's coming up a lot today in this, but Freud felt that the task of psychoanalysis and psychotherapy was to actually really calm that superego, to enable that judge, that malign judge, if you like, to move back, so that we can live our lives, we can fulfill these lives of potential again. Thanks very much.